Welcome to Every Friday with, like it or not, with Dan and Olivia. I'm Dan Miles.
I'm Olivia Delbo.
A little nod to Don Felder of the Eagles, who wrote that song, though the funky drumming was someone else's doing. Don was on my show back in 2013, episode 46 to be precise. Very nice gentleman and a very talented musician, to say the least. And speaking of praise, my topic for today involves parenting. Another thing Olivia and I have in common is that we're both parents. We both have sons, in fact. I tend to give my boys a lot of praise and verbal support and encouragement. And I've noticed when my mother visits us, she sort of winces when I do that. And, she has a doctorate in child psychology, and so her opinions, have validity, of course. But the reason I do that, above and beyond the usual parental pride and love you have for your kids, is, when I'm telling them they're the greatest when they clear a level on a video game, or I compliment them on finishing their homework ahead of schedule, whatever it is, I just want them to understand that in my house, under my roof, they're always going to be the greatest in my eyes. They'll all be safe there. They'll always be loved there. Because let's face it, when they walk out the door, they're very well aware of how others perceive and value or possibly devalue them. They know who likes them and who doesn't, who's nice to them, who's mean to them. I know my mother's implied concern is the idea of giving a false or inflated opinion of their own self-worth, making them egotistical or giving them expectations for their lives, that are like maybe not realistic. I just don't want them to grow up to be like so many adults who say, I guess my parents loved me. We didn't really talk about it. I guess they did. In my house, I tell my kids I love them all the time, and so they know where they stand. So, when I say that, what are your feelings that come to mind?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely. I totally agree. I think, I actually think praising even for the little things is only that much more encouragement for them to go to the next step. And, I think if you just have parents who praise you for the big things, that's kind of one-sided. I mean, especially if you have a child who's, a late bloomer, has a little ADD, this, that, and the other. I mean, we all have our strengths and weaknesses. And personally, I come from a English family who...
No.
Yes.
I never knew.
Don't you have a little German in you?
I couldn't tell you're English. I was trying to place the accent. I thought you were from, I don't know, Manitoba.
Yeah.
I knew you were English. I'm
That's
sorry.
Right.
I'm sorry I interrupted you. Please proceed.
It's okay. No, but so from my existence, my background, it's like children. There's still very much that sensibility that children are seen and not heard.
Yeah.
But then when we moved to New Mexico, that all went flying out the window. Because I got this much more Americana upbringing, which I'm very thankful for. But I think, if you only, I came from kind of a more judgmental, my family were very measuring and harsh a little bit on, this has to be done and these are your good points and your bad points. And so then, if you're not careful with that and you can't, you're not sure sort of how to be assertive as a parent about exactly what you say to your children, they're going to come to their own conclusions about what that means. And sometimes they're not necessarily going to be the most positive ones. So I think it's one of the aspects of parenting that you have to really be sure about how it's coming across to the child.
There's a company I used to work with, and there was a lot of women working there. And there was one particular woman who worked there, and they didn't like the way she talked to her kid. She was always like, "Oh, you're just the best. I love you so much." Like constant, almost like you would with, I don't know, with your little dog or something. I mean, it kind of sickened them, I guess, because of the amount of it. I don't think I ever did it to that degree, but that's her and her child, and it's sort of up to them. And I have seen little spoiled, rotten kids, too, honestly. And there's that. But, I would say that as I grew up, I didn't really get excessive praise. I didn't get a lot of praise or acknowledgement, but, I didn't really feel like I needed a lot of it. I didn't need constant reassurance or anything. It'd be nice if your ball team wins and everybody says, hey, great job, and the obvious stuff. But I will say that I think it's criticism that really stays with you, being criticized about things. So it's harder to forget a criticism than to remember a compliment, I think, in a certain level. So if my parents were critical of me, or particularly some, I think, unfairly in some cases, I would remember that longer than if they told me, yeah, you did great on the science test. I'll forget that. So
yeah, definitely.
Another thing I'm thinking about that ties in with this is, because we're talking about podcasts, Breaking Bad is a real popular show. They have a podcast, the Breaking Bad Insider podcast, which I like, but I understand this criticism. If you go to there and read the iTunes reviews, people find that podcast too self-congratulatory because I was like, oh, such and such directed that episode. He was the greatest director, and such was a guest star. Oh, it was amazing. And the food and the craft service, it's like everything is so effusive and backpatting. It's just people just talk about the plot of the show, or or a camera angle or anything. But it's interesting. My takeaway from that was a little different because when they talk about how it was the greatest director, the greatest cinematographer, the greatest piece of music, the greatest acting, that show actually is an extremely upper echelon show. And there's some justification for them saying that it's really great. But also, the thing I took away from it is maybe to make a show that good, you have to have that cheerleader vibe on your set and in your writer's room and everywhere, or you don't achieve that. So the people on that podcast are the writers, showrunners, creator, editor. They're the people who actually work on the show. And I think part of the reason it's such a love fest is they don't often ever get in the same room together, because the writers and the editors are in LA and the show was shot in Albuquerque, and they go, oh, it's so great to see you. It's so exciting to have you. I'm saying this, I can see how people, sampled that podcast, didn't like all the praise and self-congratulations and tuned it out and didn't like it. In my case, I wanted to sort of understand why it was, and I think I kind of gave my explanation of why I think it was that way. Not exactly parenting, but
but I think one of the things that you were saying earlier on is that you let your boys know that you love them in your house. That's just the way your household is, and I think you can never give a child enough love. I mean, there's some things that you're speculating as a parent, thinking, oh, am I doing this right? Am I doing that? That's just a sure bet across the board that you can never give enough love, and it goes a long way, because it builds confidence, and you walk around with your chest up, and
as I say, I want them to know, particularly as they meet other friends who maybe complain about having to go home after school because it's a tense environment. When they come home to my house, it's going to be very positive. Now, believe me, I'm not like a total pushover. They don't just run the shit. Well, Jackson kind of runs the show, but
is that the one that was had a little fever today?
Yeah,
yesterday.
Yeah. He's susceptible to that sort of thing. He's a very sophisticated manipulator for 5 years old, and they always are.
And that's the other thing that gets a little bit tricky. If you're, again, you can never give them enough love. But then there's some kids at a certain age that they're just like, oh, Daddy, I can do no wrong. I'm just a superhero. And then they can get kind of Machiavellian, and you have to reel them back a little bit and say,
Machiavellian, right? Yeah. If I was to get a sense that my kids were acting bad, and I was the cause of it, it would be different. But, I'm trying to teach them to be nice to all the kids,
Treat everybody as you would want to be treated yourself.
Not just the ones you like, and the older kids and the younger kids and the kids that look like they maybe need a friend, or, that kind of thing.
Make friends with the nerds.
Speaking of my kids, this is funny because you'll be working for them.
The nerds are the cool people,
my boys have different temperaments, and hopefully as they get older and hear this years from now, they won't mind me talking about this. But, my older boy, Zachary, he's very sweet. And I remember one time we were out someplace, and there was this little structure, and he was trying to go through the door, and another kid was coming out at the same time. And they sort of looked at each other. Zach gave him a big smile, and the kid gave him a scowl and looked around. And you could tell if there weren't adults around, he might have just pushed him down.
Right.
But he didn't feel like he could. But, Zachary's a little sweetheart. Well, Jackson, we were at a playground, and Jackson's coming up the stairs, and another kid is coming down the stairs, and they get to that point, and the kid is 3 times Jackson's size, and Jackson looks up and he goes, move!
I love it.
He's like, you're in my way. I'm walking in.
Yeah.
It's like, Zachary would have smiled and maybe moved to the side. And Jackson was like, hey, dude, I'm walking up the steps in the playground. I don't care if you're 3 times my size. But you're in my way and you need to move.
And my point is he's like, probably because of all the love that both you and, their mother give to them, they're walking around as really confident young kids,
He sure is.
Yeah, regardless of size, which is really important because, as boys, you can be a little undersized and then you have a growth spurt.
Chance for you to mention your own siblings, older brothers, sisters.
Yeah, gosh, they just keep growing as the days go by. My father, who's, 70 now, has just, had 2 twins who are 8-year-olds 8 years ago. So the family just keeps getting larger and larger, and it's wonderful. I mean, I'm this stage, I'm more like an aunt than a sister, but so I have an older brother, I have a younger brother who just got married, and another little brother who's 8, and then his twin sister who's my only sister who's 8. And it's, it's wonderful. The bigger the family, the better. But then you have the situation that I have, like with the only child, and so, a lot of your decisions as a parent, I think, they're almost. It's not that one decision based on you having, let's say, 3 kids as opposed to one is more important than the other, but you have to really think about things. I found that I had challenges probably that other parents who maybe had more kids wouldn't have come up against, having, a son, just one son. So, because they don't have other brothers or sisters to work off of, you were talking about the dynamic between your 2 sons. One's older, one's younger, and ironically, they both have completely different contrasting personalities, which is a real positive, I think, growing up.
Yeah,
but if you just, my boy is just super intelligent, super deep. He's a real old soul, and he's sort of a philosopher and an intellectual, and very much a sponge and a creature of his environment. So, he's strong, but also super sensitive. So I've really honed in and been extra careful and sensitive to, being honest when needed, and sensitive to his moods, because he's kind of a creature of his own environment, and what kind of environment I put him in academically and socially, because the social environment really had a lot to do with how he would excel academically. If he was safe and happy in an environment, then his grades, since I really focused in on making that a primary thing, he's done great with his grades and, gone on to...
Well, clearly, regardless of the actual words you're saying, everybody can tell that you really care, about him and about his whole trip. Because there are a lot of people, their parents, because it was expected of them, or because they accidentally fell into it, and they maybe don't care. Yeah. And they're neglectful. And then kids pick up on that, too, because my kids know that they're very important to me, that... even if I'm doing something else, Daddy has to do his work, or Daddy's doing the laundry, right?
But you always want them to know that they're a priority, that they're your number one priority. I mean, I would hope that would be the case with all parents. But children don't always, on the reciprocating end, feel that they are the priority, especially if they have parents who are working all the time and super busy. So it's really important to take the time out if that's your thing, if you are a super busy, proactive, multitasking parent, that you take the time out to let them know that, yes, you do work around the clock, but they're your number one,
Yeah, in both directions, you don't want to feel taken for granted.
Exactly.
Want the children to take the parents for granted. Where's my dinner?
Well, then you fall into the category. Right. Then you get into the category of a child that is potentially going to go into the world feeling entitled, right. And that's really doing your child a disservice, because that's not what it's like when you get out of the big bad world. That they're going to have everything and anything that they want. Right. You have to also harness that so that they're going into the world really from a real perspective.
Well, mine just started 3rd grade in kindergarten. They're just beginning to understand that you need money to live, and you go to work to get the money, and you don't have the money to get every single thing you want.
Right.
And you should appreciate when you do get something. And, they're good kids, and they're smart kids, and they're learning, of course. They learn by leaps and bounds. But they learn from me, and they learn from their peers, and any of the kids learn at school and all these different things. It always surprises me when they come up with some phrase or some reference that I have no idea where they got it from, or my 5-year-old will sometimes use like an 80-year-old man type expression. I go, where did you hear that?
Yeah, that's what's amazing about procreation, is that you have these children who are that much more wise and intellectually sound. They just come into the world with that much more, with the sixth sense that maybe you're never going to have, and they teach you. For that matter, so much more than you could ever read in a textbook.
Yeah, and also, I came to it kind of late. I was in my 40s when my kids were born, so it's a little different maybe than if I would have had them in my 20s. I don't regret it, or it's not a positive or negative. Well, it has positive and negative aspects to it. The positive is I'm mature and settled, and I can't say, I didn't have my chance to do what I wanted. As in my 40s, I had a chance to do what I wanted.
Yeah.
The downside is I'm conscious of the fact that, they'll, even if I live to be 90 years old, they'll probably live a majority of their life without me. But it makes me appreciate each age they go through and each moment I have with them more so than I probably would have, if I would have had them when I was 25 or something. Mm-hmm. Well, I get the impression that parenting is something we will be revisiting in the future.
Most definitely.
Yeah, exactly. It's time for another song. And, I want to play another of Olivia's songs. I love Olivia's album. We haven't played one for a while. So let's grab, I don't know, Undertow.
Okay.
The mail didn't come today. Another lesson gonna have to learn the hard way. She only wants to play. She's got a box of faded roses and a birthday cake. Only a small mistake. A careless error in a world of silly heartaches. I'm a long tall Sally on a dinosaur, yeah. I put my knees to my belly on the kitchen floor. And it's funny how time moves along, yet I can't seem to strum a chord of happiness. Oh, and it moves inside me like a tide. The undercurrent slips and slides me back again. Shoot myself in the foot. I take on everything and everybody's bullshit. But things are still looking good, 'cause the world is my oyster in this neighborhood. There's iron in my veins. Yeah, my blood flows slowly through the petrified woods. I'm a long tall Sally on a dinosaur, yeah. I put my knees to my belly on the kitchen floor. And it's funny how time moves along, yet I can't seem to strum a chord of happiness. Oh, and it moves inside me like a tide. The undercurrent slips and slides me back again. Hard enough to open up the curtain all the way. I still got my face pressed against the ceiling, hiding from all the flowers and the snakes. Can you hear me? Calling out to you. Can you hear me? I'm calling out to you. Can you hard way.
I love that song. I love all the songs on there, but that's always been a favorite of mine. It just has that kind of quality that you can listen. We listened to Deacon Blues several episodes ago.
Yeah.
I wouldn't compare the songs, harmonically or anything. They're different type of music, but
It's more poppy. Well, yeah.
I
You just can't compare them, really.
No, but I mean, of other Steely Dan songs, Deacon Blues is one I would listen to in a loop.
Absolutely.
And same with Undertow.
Oh, thank you.
So, hey, enjoyed your week, I hope. Enjoy your weekend coming up. And I will say goodbye.
And so will I. Goodbye.
Awkwardest ending yet, but we'll
Okay.
take it.